According to chapter 2 of Nehemiah, after 4 months, God answered his prayers. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was served to him, I carried the wine and gave it to the king. Now I had never been sad in his presence before. So the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, since you are not sick?" This can only be sadness of the heart. Then I was very much afraid. Being the cupbearer for the king, Nehemiah must always keep his pose in the presence of the king. Therefore the king noticed his unusual sadness. Nehemiah desired to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls, but he was very much afraid, for he knew that King Artaxerxes stopped the construction previously. So he prayed to God, and God gave him wisdom to answer the king with wisdom. The city, the place of my ancestors' graves, lies waste, and its gates have been destroyed by fire. If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor with you, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my ancestors' graves, so that I may rebuild it. Nehemiah carefully phrased his answer and did not mention the name of Jerusalem. God moves the heart of the king to grant Nehemiah's requests.
It is written in chapter 2, verses 7 to 8, that for the gracious hand of God, the king granted Nehemiah the 2 things that he requested and issued a decree. First, to notify all the governors of the province beyond the river to grant him passage. Second, to notify the keeper of the king's forest to give him timber to build the walls and the temple fortress. Lastly, the king sent officers of the army and a cavalry to escort Nehemiah. According to chapter 2, verse 1, the time of the 3rd return led by Nehemiah should be sometime after the month of Nisan in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, that is, 445 BC. It had been 13 years after the 2nd return to Jerusalem led by Ezra, and 92 years, or almost a century, after the 1st return led by Zerubbabel.
Quickly, the Bible said Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem. So I came to Jerusalem and was there for 3 days. Nehemiah was in Jerusalem for 3 days. What did he do? The Bible does not mention. In order to understand Nehemiah's plan, let us take a look at the walls and the gates of the old city of Jerusalem today as an illustration. These rather complete walls and gates we saw were built in the 16th century by the Ottoman Empire. The walls stretch for approximately 4.5 kilometers. With a height of 5 to 15 meters and are 3 meters thick. Although these walls and gates were not built by Nehemiah, for the materials and technology were much better than those used in the time of Nehemiah, 2,500 years ago, we can still picture that the look and structure should be pretty much the same. Currently, there are 8 gates in the old city. The Golden Gate is closed, but the other 7 gates are still in use. This is the Dung Gate, built in the 16th century. People used to take the stool and the trash outside of the city through this gate because the elevation was relatively low here. In the southernmost of the city of David on my south, which was also a relatively low area, there was a similar dung gate at the times of Nehemiah. Nehemiah chapter 2 mentions the dung gate. Then I got up during the night, I and a few men with me. I told no one what my God had put into my heart to do for Jerusalem. I went out by night by the valley gate, past the Dragon's Spring, and to the dung gate. And I inspected the walls of Jerusalem that had been broken down, and its gates that had been destroyed by fire. Dung Gate is at the southernmost part of the city. People go to the valley of the son of Hinnom through this gate. Then I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool. But there was no place for the animal I was riding to continue. So I went up by way of the valley by night and inspected the wall. Then I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. The officials did not know where I had gone or what I was doing. The valley mentioned in the scriptures referred to the Kidron Valley. The wall Nehemiah inspected by night was the wall at the south of Jerusalem. That part of the wall probably looked similar to the old city wall behind me. The route of Nehemiah's inspection helps us to learn more about the city planning of Jerusalem by then. Let us compare the scope of the walls of the old city built in the Ottoman Empire with this modern aerial photograph of Jerusalem. We will have a better understanding of the various boundary changes of Jerusalem from the era of David, Solomon, to Hezekiah, and finally the time of Nehemiah. Nehemiah was a very capable leader. With the mission to build the walls in mind, he knew that this huge project must have the support of the people without letting the enemies discover his plan too soon. So Nehemiah came to Jerusalem and was there for 3 days. He probably used these 3 days to understand the damage of the walls first and drew up his reconstruction plan. Then, in chapter 2, verse 18, he called on his fellow citizens to start the work. Nehemiah sets a great working mode for us to follow, that prayer comes first, understanding the situation before planning, then the action comes in the end.
However, we sometimes suffer all sorts of hardships for God's work. Before Nehemiah started to rebuild the city wall, Nehemiah chapter 2 verse 10 specifically mentions 2 enemies, Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite. Jewish historian Josephus believed that Sanballat was the governor of Samaria, and Tobiah, the Ammonite leader, could be a provincial governor at the east of Jordan River. They were very hostile to the returnees. When the Israelites were under captivity, the Samaritans and the Ammonites took over the governance in the land of Judah. If Jerusalem were rebuilt, the Israelites could regain, which would jeopardize their political power in this region. This is in line with the descriptions recorded in Ezra.
At Spring of Water International Ministries, we invite you to journey with us, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Isaiah 55:10. To find out more, follow Spring of Water International Ministries.